Welcome to the 1905 podcast. Joe and I have been going to Stamford Bridge for over 30 years. For the past 3 years, we've been exchanging voice notes on everything from the highs in Porto to the lows of Potter. Each week, this podcast will take you inside our unfiltered thoughts on all things Chelsea, sharing our view from Gate 13 of the Matthew Harding stand. Let's hit the notes. After an incredible 31 years at the club, this week we say farewell to Neil Bath, an undisputed Chelsea legend that made our academy the envy of the world. We discuss Conor Gallagher and whether or not he has a future under Maresca, talk shirt sponsors, or the lack of one, and look at our new arrival from Leicester, Dewsbury-Hall, getting the perspective from Leicester fan and comedy star Henry Rowley. To kick off, let's start with a voice note from Joe on Maresca's new man, KDH.
So another week's gone by for Chelsea Football Club, and yet again there's been another player incoming and potentially outgoing too. So the club is bonkers, isn't it? But I mean, you've got to love them. This player trading thing is absolutely balmy, but we're never short for content, that's for sure. Dewsbury-Hall is our latest addition to the team, and I think in my opinion this is a really interesting signing and signals a move which says to the manager that they are certainly willing to back him. I think sometimes clubs do grant them a new manager, a player of their choosing, and clearly Maresca has chosen him or identified him as someone he wants to bring into our midfield, even though we are, pretty stacked there really. I like the fact that these two have worked together before in a very successful season for Leicester, and that Maresca trusts him to come into a Chelsea team that is, filled with expensive signings of recent years of Enzo and Caicedo, and even Lavia, who hasn't played yet for the club really. But he believes that Dewsbury-Hall can offer something in our midfield that maybe gives us more balance, perhaps on that left-hand side. I think for all that Caicedo, Enzo and Gallagher bring to the team, there is just something that is missing. I don't know why I think that. It never quite felt secure last year. It was better towards the end, definitely, but it just had that feeling of, I don't know, we never quite felt secure in that area of the field. And I think that's the biggest area in a team. You really need to be at it all the time. Otherwise, you do get unstuck by the better sides. I mean, I know with Lavia coming back, he's going to be like a new signing for us. And I think the addition of Dewsbury-Hall will add some creativity with his incredible left foot, because it really is a wand. He's got fantastic delivery from set pieces and from open play. He really is brilliant on that side. And you could definitely see his role under Maresca completely changed, because from what I remember of him, he was quite box-to-box. But under Maresca, he seemed to be getting on the end of balls and creating the last chance or finishing the last chance for Leicester last season. And he's got a good finish on him, actually. He's not a mug in front of goal. Do you know what I mean? He can finish, and I think 12 goals, 14 assists last year sort of proves that. And then you look at his age, at 25 years of age, it's genuine experience, isn't it, to a very young group. I think there's a bit of leadership there with him. I think this deal is pretty exciting, actually. I just think he's such a good passer. He sees things that a lot of midfield players don't. He can play the ball down the line. He can chip balls over the top. He can play through ball through to Vardy last season, and he kind of the weight of his pass as well. It's not just the way he does it; it's the timing of it and the genuine kind of speed and weight is just absolutely perfect. And the fact that he's willing to sort of dribble out from midfield and wait for the perfect opportunity, and then he can slide that ball through, and he just keeps you playing on the front foot the whole time. I mean, in many ways, he's a bit like Gallagher in terms of he likes to break up the play with interceptions. He's got fantastic energy around the field. And I think he really offers that kind of springboard on that left-hand side where we've just been a little bit weak for me. And if you look at the deal that Michael Golding is going the other way from our academy to Leicester, the fee seems to be around £5 million. It just sort of shows you again that this is the new way to do a player exchange. They're separate deals on paper, but basically they are, it's exchanging players one for another. Kellyman and Matson was done last week, and this clearly is going to happen again today. And I think the Chelsea owners are seriously now playing the Premier League at their own game, and quite frankly, I think it's hilarious.
Hello. Wimbledon's on. Let me turn that off. Piss it off. We're talking about footy. Dewsbury-Hall. Yeah, that's a tough one to take for a Leicester fan. I mean, I think, to be honest, we didn't really have any options because of the financial fair play rules. So it's fine. Had to be done. Was also inevitable because of the way he played last season. I personally think he's amazing. Box-to-box player. He really, he's one of those guys that really gives 100% and also has the talent. So he's got the talent and the hard work to back it up. And he seemed to really fit into the way that Maresca played. So I think the fact that Maresca's brought him along to Chelsea isn't surprising at all. And I think, with Maresca as manager, it's the perfect sort of recipe to help bring KDH and bring his potential out in the Premier League, because obviously it's entirely different. But he was in Championship Team of the Season last year. He was Leicester's Player of the Season. I think he got Supporters Player and Players Player as well last year. He's a good player. I think there was one criticism that I heard from some other opposition fans from the Championship last year where they said he goes down too easily. But no, I don't think so. I think it's just a sign of how good he is when he keeps getting fouled. Do you know what I mean? Players foul you when they don't know how to stop you. But yeah, he's box to box. He poses an attacking threat and also is defensively strong. And I think that does work with the sort of balance that Maresca tries to bring to a team. I don't know how Maresca will approach Chelsea because it's a different team. But yeah, I think it's a good signing for you guys. It's hard with your team. It's hard to see where anyone's going to fit in though, because you've signed all these brand new players. There's no real structure in place, which gives you the benefit of sort of, you've got the freedom there, and it's easier for new players to break in and easier to introduce a new style of football, which is what Maresca did with Leicester. But it's difficult because you've got no foundations to build. I mean, you might disagree. You watch Chelsea more than me, but from what I can see, there's not as much foundations to build off. But I think that means there is room for Dewsbury-Hall to sort of come in and have an immediate impact.
Really cool and encouraging, actually, to hear what Henry thinks of him. I really like the signing as well. I think we obviously got a couple of players in that position from Leicester in the past, and N'Golo Kante and Drinkwater. So if both of us are very similar money as well, weren't they? Both about 30 million. So if he turns out to be even somewhere in the middle of those two in terms of how he does at Chelsea, we'll be probably pretty happy. I think the big thing for me is that he addresses a real need that we've had for a while of having a goal threat from midfield. In that centre midfield, I didn't mind the old midfield of Kante, Jorginho and Kovacic at times, but the one thing you always felt was that there was no goals there, and that kind of showed and put a lot of pressure on other areas of the pitch to get you goals. And you kind of look at what we've bought, and whilst I love Caicedo and Enzo in their own different ways, Caicedo's a 1 to 2 goal a season man, isn't he? Enzo actually ended up on not a bad tally, but you don't feel like he's ever going to get you more than sort of 5 to 10 goals a season. Gallagher, as we saw at Palace, has that in him, and he had a good second half of the season last year of doing that. But again, you'd want to try and see more consistency. So having another player in there who's going to get you goals from centre midfield and be a threat, I think is really important, and something that's been missing for a while. And obviously, he's a Maresca man, as you guys have both said. So Maresca's going to know immediately where he wants to put him. He's going to have a really clear role and actually hopefully help us kind of adjust to the new way of playing and all that kind of stuff. And maybe the most important thing about KDH is the fact he really addresses a need that Chelsea have had for some time, which is a decent new chant for a player. And actually the Leicester fans came up with an absolute belter for him, which is based on one of my favourite songs. So I'll play that in now so everyone can hear it, but I'm very much looking forward to singing that at Stamford Bridge next season.
I don't know if you've watched much of the Euros, mate. But to be honest, I've seen pretty much every game, apart from maybe the occasional sort of one that's at 5 o'clock and I've been at work or something. But generally, I've seen them all. And I think what I've noticed the most is that there isn't many players that have that ability to break down defences. I've seen like loads of huffing and puffing from teams, and their final ball's been quite lacking at times, to be honest. And all I keep seeing is when Cole Palmer comes off the bench, there's a player there who, with limited minutes, has provided through balls, incredibly dangerous crosses, and the ability to step back and pick out an individual unmarked in the opposing 18-yard box. And it happens every single time. And it's like, what is Southgate seeing that we're not? Because Saka and Foden have been, they're good players, obviously, but they're not doing it. And you've got players at your disposal on the bench there that are just basically crying out to come on and play for England, and he's not using them properly. I think the only other players that I've seen similar to Palmer is that Yamal and Nico Williams to Spain, because they've been absolutely fantastic. And they've got that fearless streak. It's like a superpower in some ways. They don't care if they make a mistake or if they do some step overs or some dribbles and then their final ball perhaps isn't perfect, because they know next time they'll get it right. If you keep giving them the ball, at least 1 out of 2 or certainly 2 out of those 3 crosses are going to make their way onto Olmo's head or Morata's head, for example. So it is incredible to see that there aren't that many out there at the moment that are, maybe in South America perhaps, in the Copa America, but in this Euros it's been quite quiet on the really creative front, and there's been a real lack of goals, I think. I mean, you can see loads of own goals, but yeah, not many sort of players have stood out so far for me. We're just so blessed, aren't we, with Palmer? You could play him anywhere in our front three, and you're going to get a tune out of him. He will give you some output in every single match. And that 35 million, 40 million pound purchase last summer, absolutely brilliant. And then you look at sort of someone like Gallagher, who's come on for his minutes, and you sort of see where he's at with his attacking deficiencies are, really. He's done okay, but he's all very safe, isn't he? I think the match-going Chelsea fans would certainly like to see him in a blue shirt again next year, as would I. But he has to do more than just win the ball back. He's sort of slowly added a few goals to his game, and there was some, occasional assists and things, or maybe the assist before the assist. But he does have to be a bit more creative and a bit more clever in his play. I mean, you see with England how almost vanilla his play has been. It's very, like I say, very safe and very calculated. It never feels like off the cuff. It's all very like premeditated. Sort of wins the ball back, passes it sideways. Okay, that's my job done. And he certainly needs to look forward a lot more and stop passing sideways and back, because that's not going to turn Chelsea or England into serial winners, is it? Obviously, in an ideal world, you'd definitely keep a player like Gallagher. But with the PSR rules, as we all know, I just can't see how he stays. I feel we're only an England tournament exit away from Connor now really finding a new team, which is, it does sadden me, because I just can't see how we keep Lavia, Enzo, Caicedo, Dewsbury-Hall now. It's just an area of field. It's so bloated. And we've probably, in all honesty, made the calculations to offload him sort of before the tournament even sort of began. But I think the only way he stays is if Lavia isn't fit enough to get through the whole season. But you think he must now surely be over his injury concerns. I mean, there was talk this morning of a new deal being agreed for Gallagher, and if that's the case, then and they can sort of work it on the PSR front, then I'm all for it. But look, Connor is Chelsea through and through, and it's a real crap predicament to be in, because if he does go, he goes with like total love and affection from me, and I'm sure pretty much all Chelsea fans. He's played and captained for his boyhood club, and in my opinion, it really doesn't get much better than that. And like I say, I hope he stays, but my worry is now that with the addition of Dewsbury-Hall as well, that this is probably an exit strategy now.
Yeah, on Palmer, I think you've nailed it there. I mean, he's really something special, isn't he? And I mean, let's see if he starts the next England game. He has to, really, doesn't he? But for Chelsea, the club needs to be looking to build a team around him. I think he really is that good. As you said, he can play anywhere at all in that front line and be comfortably our best player. And I'd be looking to build it around him at this stage. So really excited to see what he comes back and does next season. And he just feels like he's got more and more to add to his game as well. You can just see him getting better and better, to be honest. I think I said to you last season that I think his future will end up lying more centrally, a little bit like De Bruyne. If you remember De Bruyne in the very early days, he often played out a bit more out wide, but then obviously matured into a proper centre midfielder. And I could see Palmer taking up very similar positions that De Bruyne does, and we saw it at the end of last season, didn't we, with Madueke on the right. I just see that you'd kind of want Palmer as in as many, well, one, able to get on the ball as much as possible, and two, able to be dangerous from anywhere on the pitch, which he can do. So, yeah, love the guy. We might well have finally got a bit of, I don't know if revenge is the right word, but got one made amends from like having to watch Salah do so well at Liverpool and De Bruyne obviously do so well at City, and finally have one that we've taken from another club that they probably shouldn't have let go, and we can very much enjoy that. So yeah, excited about that. In terms of Gallagher, I think you're right. There's a lot of players in that central space now with KDH joining as well. I think my feeling on Gallagher though has been, if the club are sensible in terms of their ownership, then it's an absolute no-brainer in my mind to sign him up to a new contract. And the reason is really simple, twofold. One, the majority of fans are crying out for it. They've been certainly in the ground last year. Everyone wants Gallagher to stay. He got an amazing reception as he went round with his dad at the end of the game and the last game of the season. And I think from a PR point of view, giving him a deal doesn't have to be a massively long deal. You know, don't have to be a 6 or 7er, but give him a 3 or 4 year extension, and time down would do a lot for the fans. I think even in the short term that would be a big win. Secondly, if he doesn't end up being a big part of the team next season, which I think there's a good chance he might not be, but I still think he has an important role to play in terms of even if he's a sub to help close out games and that kind of stuff, then if you do decide to sell him next summer, one, his value will be considerably higher because he's not got a year left on his contract. So I think you could probably be looking to get 60 million for him, which is about the market value you'd want for him at this stage. Whereas I think if we sold him now, you'd probably get nearer 30, 40, wouldn't you? Because he's only got a year left. So that's the one thing, just a no-brainer in terms of value. And secondly, I think that actually if off the back of a season where maybe he doesn't play as much, and let's say Dewsbury-Hall or Lavia or whoever really kind of comes to the fore and is playing brilliantly, I think the fans will accept it as well. I don't think there'll be as much resistance. I think it'll be a shame, and he'll leave with, with good faith in terms of the fans, but I don't think it will be kind of toxic in the same way that I think it would be if he went this summer. And based on what we're seeing and hearing from kind of getting through PSR pretty well, there doesn't seem any urgency to sell him now either. So I would personally really like to see him stay. I know you would as well, but I think from a club point of view, I think it would be really smart to keep him, and just to see kind of what happens this season in terms of how much he plays. And I said this to you a few times last season when we were thinking about the future, but I do think that you need players like Gallagher around a really successful squad. A classic example was someone like Darren Fletcher at Man United in those years under Fergie. Not a starter, like absolutely not in their best ever teams, but always played 20 or 30 games a season. Do you know what I mean? Always coming on in games, maybe in the lineup when you need to sort of pack the midfield with a bit more legs, that kind of game. Obviously, we're going to have a lot of games next season with the Conference League as well. He's very durable. So I actually think Gallagher's a sort of player that has quite a lot of uses. And obviously being homegrown and being a Chelsea boy, I think things like that are going to be really helpful when we have all these young players coming through as well. So let's see what happens. It'll be really interesting, to see what, I think once England go out, I imagine you get some clarity on it fairly quickly. in terms of whether it's a new deal or we hear more links out of the club. But the links out have gone a bit quieter, haven't they? So I'm kind of hopeful that he'll stay, get a new contract, and then kind of kick the can down the road for another year and see where we're at then. But let's see. Hey, it's Chris here with a really quick message. Check us out on Instagram at 1905 Podcast. You'll find video clips, photos, and much more about everything we discuss on the show. Plus, it's a great way to get in touch to tell us your thoughts, share your feedback, or just say hi. Follow us on Instagram at 1905 Podcast. And now, back to the show.
I'm not sure if you've seen this yet, but Jim Fraser and Neil Bath have basically agreed to mutually terminate their contracts. So I think they're leaving pretty much with immediate effect, which is a real shame, isn't it? I mean, what a legacy they're going to leave behind. I mean, our academy is basically revered, isn't it, amongst all the others. I think Man City is catching up a bit and stuff, but wow, they are the blueprint for how you do things, and yeah, what a real shame. I hope it's not due to the fact that they're bringing in lots and lots of other players from abroad and things, youngsters, but yeah, it might just be that they've had their time and they just want to go and try something different, maybe. Who knows? But that's a real shame. I'm a bit gutted about that, actually. But so the only saving grace is that looks as though Joe Shields is going to take the job, which is impressive, and he has got some serious pedigree behind him now. So that's, I suppose, a silver lining, that we've got someone who's incredible in youth football and has been incredible in also bringing in some of the recent players. So that's at least that's a bit of a golden nugget to hang on to. I think the other one, I'm not sure of his name, but there's a chap coming from Benfica to run the under-23s. So again, Benfica's academy, or whatever they class it over there, is also pretty impressive. So that's also good news. But yeah, real shame about Neil Bath. Absolute legend. He's done so much for the club. I think every Chelsea fan should owe him a great deal of respect and debt, to be honest. He's been incredible. It doesn't look like he's got a club to go to. So whether he's going to go back into football or try something different, I don't know. But yeah, at this stage, it's a bit raw, but what a shame.
Yeah, wow. End of an era with Neil Bath leaving the club. I mean, what an impact he's had. That kind of goes without saying. But I was looking into it. He actually joined Chelsea in 1993, which is when I started going to Chelsea. And I was like, wow, think about how much has changed at the club in that time. I mean, how much has changed in the world in that time, let alone the club. But wow, it's just absolutely incredible. I mean, to be at any organisation for 30 plus years is pretty incredible, to be fair. And I think the legacy that he'll leave behind is just incredibly special. I think, you're seeing it already on social and stuff, that a lot of the narrative that people want to put out now is very negative. And actually, I just feel like these kind of things happen, right? Whenever there are changes in an organisation with new ownership, which is basically Chelsea are a company, they're an organisation, you often find that, people who've been there a long time will move on. It happened when Abramovich joined Chelsea, and of course it's going to happen with the new owners here. And we've seen a lot of change, obviously, with Emma Hayes moving on as well. Loads of changes in the staff, and now obviously the big changes at Cobham with Neil Bath and Jim Fraser leaving. And rather than kind of like dress this up as crisis and all that kind of stuff, I'd rather not do that. I'd rather go, well, as you said, we look like we're in good hands going forward. I like the names of the appointments that looking to come in. Let's judge that in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time. Let's see where the academy's at then. Let's see where Cobham is. One of the best things I think about Neil Bath, I want to say, is that it's very rare at any club, and particularly Chelsea, because everyone hates Chelsea, as we know, that everyone in the football world respects you for something. And actually, the Chelsea Academy has been that one thing where every rival fan will even kind of reluctantly go, yeah, the Chelsea Academy is just ridiculous. And I think that's the biggest legacy you can leave, to be the number one in probably the world for a while at what we do is absolutely amazing. and that is just something to be proud of. So I think he's left that legacy behind him for the team to carry on, and yeah, something for us to be really proud of. So good luck to what he does next. As long as he doesn't go to Spurs, we'll be fine and we'll be happy. And let's see what happens. Hello, listeners. So, in a bit of a weird twist of fate, Joe actually sent the following voice note I'm about to play about 4 days before it was announced that Neil Bath was leaving Chelsea. As you'll hear in the voice note, his son is currently training at Chelsea's academy, and Joe thought it would be interesting to give us a voice note about kind of the experiences he's had going to Cobham with his boy and kind of the setup there and those kind of things. So we thought it was really appropriate actually to put that in this week's episode with Neil Bath leaving the club. And so here's Joe's voice note and his experience of being at Cobham.
Evening, mate. I'm just with my lad. He's at Chelsea tonight. He's down here at the training ground again. It's always a pleasure to be here. As Chelsea fans, me and my family, it's always been a joy to have one of your children play at the club at the moment, and that's always brilliant to see. I love how he's taken to it. Initially, he was a little bit unsure, and I think that's kind of made him quite appreciative of what he's now doing. He's always been a good player, but this is kind of taking him to that next level. And I think the first day we came into the training ground and you you get taken in and you get your name taken and where you're going and you're trying to find your way around it, it's all a bit shock and awe. And then after a while now it's just become like your second home. So when I think a couple of years ago when he came down and it was all very new, and watching him tonight, how brilliant they all are, not just my son but all the boys that are his age group and obviously above and below. So what you see and hear from how good the Chelsea Academy is, and I'm sure there's others that are fantastic too, of course, but the amount of kids they have, and anyone who's anyone is really here. If you're any good, it's such a fantastic place to learn your trade. And whether the kids end up becoming Chelsea players or players for a different team at whatever level, it gives you such a good grounding. You always hear that on the Athletic and from people like Matt Law and Nizar Kinsella of how when you come from out of the Chelsea Academy or whatever, you're always given those a leg up almost into other clubs because you bring in such a good level of coaching that it always holds you in good stead for the future. And I think when you see it actually live and in person, the detail the coaches go into, but the fun they have, and I think that's what is missing a lot with some grassroots football, and not all, because there are some amazing grassroots managers and coaches, and everyone does it for their own reasons. But I think when you see sometimes how serious it's taken on a Sunday or a Saturday morning, and I see that for myself too, when they come here, there's an element of like, yes, you've got to be willing to be here, want to be here, and they demand that you're concentrating and all of that. But once you take that all to the side, there is this now complete fun factor. They don't knock it out of them completely, and I think that's what's really, really nice to see. So yeah, I think overall, I say having a child here is really lovely for me, and we never take it for granted.
So I think we're both pretty positive actually about the new owners and the changes they've been making, want to give it time and can see kind of the direction they're taking the club. And actually, I've talked a little bit before about some of the changes they made in the stadium that a lot of people wouldn't have noticed, but slightly improving the bars and things like that. So there's a lot of little things that they've done, signage around the ground, that kind of stuff that most people don't see, but actually I think makes a difference. And I have like full faith that when it comes to looking at the new stadium, they will do an amazing job on that based on their track record and the people they've got involved. The new stadium, by the way, has to have a roof on it. And that's one which I'll definitely go into more detail on another note. But remember I said it first, Chelsea's new Stamford Bridge has to have a roof, like Real Madrid. Anyway, but there's one thing about them that is, I think they've really messed up on, and it's just really frustrating, and it is the shirt sponsor debacle, as I'm going to call it. And the fact that we're again in July going into the new season and still don't know who our shirt sponsor is going to be for the second year running, it is a bit embarrassing. I think what's brought it up to me is the fact you've got new players being obviously paraded on social and that kind of stuff and on the website, holding up last season's shirt or a training shirt. And it's just a bit embarrassing, isn't it? It just feels a bit like, what? How is that allowed to happen? What's going on in the background that's making this kind of just feel so messy going into, are we going to end up in pre-season again with a shirt with no sponsor and that kind of stuff? So, and not to give, you've heard a bit of this story before, I know, but wanted to share it with other people, not to share too much kind of information that I probably shouldn't share. But for those who don't know, I work in marketing, and specifically at the moment I work in social media for quite a large organization. And I got an email in about October last year from the company who was representing Chelsea and looking for companies to speak to about taking on sponsorship. I mean, obviously being a massive Chelsea fan, I was like, oh, I've got to reply to this email and kind of find out more. And long story short, I got a meeting with them. They took a couple of calls with me, started quoting me. I got the prices for us to sponsor the club. And they were very adamant that they were looking to, this was Infinite Athlete, it had already been secured for last season. This was kind of from this season onwards, looking for a three-year contract, that kind of stuff. And they were really adamant that it had to be done by, I think it was December the 1st, because that was when Nike would be looking to go into production for the new kits and all that kind of stuff. So that'd be partly a sales tactic, I guess, but they were all really pushing it. And two things that were really concerning to me was, one, the fact that they were actually taking a call with me who I only needed to look it up. I was looking after social media. I just wasn't an influencer in that decision at all about Chelsea being even a potential sponsor for us to, as a company, to sponsor. And secondly, my company itself there was no real reason or track record to say that we would want to sponsor a football team. There was nothing to say that we would have the budget or kind of willingness in marketing to do that kind of thing. And the fact that they took us so seriously and me so seriously was actually quite concerning. And I felt like, wow, this is a really untidy and pretty scattergun approach that's obviously been taken to get a sponsor. And it was really eye-opening, actually. And a lot of other people in my company, as you kind of started to talk about it, had got this email, obviously outreach email from the company. Like, I think a few have been shared on social media as well. And at the time, it was a bit more forgiving because you're kind of like, well, they've got to go out to market and this is part of the sales approach, right? But when you actually get, fast forward, what is it now, 8-9 months, and we still don't have a sponsor for next season, you look back at that and go, actually, that's quite embarrassing, really quite poor. So again, really have a lot of faith in the owners. Think generally things that they're doing either have been okay or will come good. But the shirt sponsor thing wrangles with me a little bit. I think it's, to be honest, quite poor. As always, we finish with a question, and this question's for Joe. So in honour of Neil Bath leaving Chelsea this week, my question is simple. What is the one Chelsea player that's come through the academy that we've let go that you most regret?
Right, it's a really quick answer for me, and it's got to be Fikayo Tomori. I mean, I was absolutely gutted when he left. I was very vocal about this. I let everyone know how annoyed and frustrated I was that the club had just let this budding English centre-back just disappear off the radar and head out to not necessarily an English rival, but a big European team who were going to reap all the rewards of what he'd started to do at Derby the year before, and then obviously break into the Chelsea first team. I think Paolo Maldini was their sporting director at the time, and obviously the pedigree that he has as a player, he sort of spotted him and was like, yeah, you'll do for me. And I suppose that was what really got on my nose, was you got possibly the best left-sided centre-back, left-back in world football ever saying, I want you to come to our club and play in our team. So I just couldn't understand the rationale of the club getting rid of him. I mean, was it a Lampard thing? He sort of alluded to the fact that maybe it wasn't him in an interview I saw on the overlap, I think it was, talking about Tomori. And yeah, it was just one of those really strange situations. He sort of played an FA Cup game or something, maybe a League Cup game, and then the very next day, he was gone. And he only played, I mean, he could have only been in the club for what, 20 games, something like that. I mean, I'd be guessing, but around 20 odd matches. And in all of those games, I admired him. I thought he had fantastic attributes for a centre back. He had a bit of a nasty streak in him as well. He wasn't shy in making a tackle and letting people know what he thought of them. So I suppose, yes, I know I'm picking another defender, but he was just someone that I really thought was going to be at the club for a long, long time. And so when he was just disappeared from the first team, I was gutted. So I think we always do this. We always think that loaning players out to teams like AC Milan or whatever, that they're just going to go there, learn their trade and come back within 6 months or a year, and we're all going to be over the moon that they've got first team football and they're suddenly going to be in the first team for Chelsea. In actual fact, what we did, we loaned him to AC Milan. We let them see all what he was, and they said, oh, yes, please. They put that £25 million obligation to buy in, and off he went. So, yeah, I was gutted about him. So, easy answer for Kayo Tomori.
Those were the Chelsea notes for this week. If you enjoyed the podcast, do us a favour and share it with a fellow Blue. And we'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave us a review wherever you're listening. Wherever you may be, stay carefree, and remember, every little thing's gonna be alright.